Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, RegisKillbin is the name and Hearthstone is the game, and these are the 10 most surprising cards from the Journey to Un'Goro launch. Now what I mean by most surprising is cards that we expected to be bad, but actually turned out to be amazing, and cards that we expected to be pretty good, but seemingly aren't going to find any sort of play in Journey to Un'Goro. And frankly, there have been quite a few cards that a lot of us got very wrong when predicting how big of an impact they would make on the meta. So let's go ahead and jump into this list. Starting off at the number 10 spot is the new Warrior Quest Fire Plume's Heart. Now this is actually a card a lot of people thought would be good. Others thought it might just be average. But the reason it makes this list is because I don't think anybody realized just how good this card would be, and specifically the deck it supports would become, because right now, about a week into Journey Un'Goro's launch, Taunt Warrior is incredibly dominant. It is far and away, as far as I can tell, the best deck on the ranked ladder, and that's because of this card. And although a lot of us thought this would make Warrior in a control fashion return to form, I don't think anybody expected just how good Fire Plume's Heart would be. Moving on to my number 9 spot is a card that some people thought would be average, would be alright, would be playable in decks like Handlock in particular, where you could just taunt it up and it would serve as a really cheap big body. But the reason this card is on the list is because most people missed just how successful this card could be in a Silence Priest deck that has been rocketing its way up the ladder, frankly. Because of cards like Faceless Shambler and because of the Divine Spirit Inner Fire combo, with the fact that you can silence this minion quite easily in a Silence Priest, it has become a very scary card where it quickly becomes a 32 health minion with 32 attack, and then that's copied by Faceless Shambler. So this card sets up all kinds of ridiculous plays in that Purify Priest deck, along with serving still some duty in Handlock as well. So actually a card that, despite how non-versatile it looks, has surprisingly showed up in a couple strong competitive decks so far. Up next at the number 8 spot is a card that looked like it was going to be fantastic in Elemental Shaman, but really so far just hasn't taken off as a part of that list, and that list is quickly becoming quite refined without Stone Sentinel. Many people thought this would just be a great way to reload the board with multiple minions, but for whatever reason, there's just something about this card that feels a little bit too awkward in most lists. It's not active enough on the board like Fire Elemental and Blaze Caller at similar costs. So most people are not including Stone Sentinel in their Elemental Shaman decks right now, despite the fact that it seems perfectly designed for what the deck wants to do. And me and many others thought this was going to be such a strong core piece of that kind of archetype for Shaman. And yet here we are, and it's not really being played at all. Moving on to the number 7 spot is one of the quests that not many people thought would be successful. I don't think people take Murlocs all that seriously, but Shaman's Unite the Murlocs has actually become a pretty strong foundation for a good competitive ladder deck where you just swarm the board with Murlocs and typically win before you really even need to activate Unite the Murlocs, because there's just a few good new Murloc cards provided. But of course this quest is still there as backup, and when you can get Megafin and then reload the board again, sometimes that's just more than your opponent can handle, giving Murloc decks the sort of backup plan they never really had in the past, and making them good on the ladder for the first time in a very long time. At the number 6 spot is Firefly. This is another one of those cards where people thought it was going to be pretty good, but the reason I'm including it on this list is because I don't think anybody realized just how pervasive this card would be in a variety of different decks. Of course, it's a staple in a lot of elemental decks because it's just a cheap minion that gives you another cheap minion, ensuring you can constantly activate your elemental mechanic. But it's even showed up in things like Quest Rogue, where it turns out the flame elementals you get in your hand are actually really fantastic at activating the Rogue quest from time to time. So it's not just an elemental deck card. It's versatile, it's cheap to craft as well as play. And ultimately, this is one of the most commonly seen cards in Journey to Un'Goro so far, I think. And despite the fact that a lot of us expected it to be solid, I don't think anybody expected it to be absolutely everywhere. And now we're into the top 5 with the Rogue's Razor Petal Lasher. A 2-mana 2/2 that very simply adds a 1-mana spell to your hand that does 1 damage. This is the kind of card I personally thought wouldn't make the cut because I couldn't see a home for it. Many others agreed it just didn't have that much value for its cost, but it turns out Razor Petal Lasher, in fact, is quite good when you build a plant Miracle Rogue and you're able to use all the different Razor Petals to activate Miracle Rogue synergies as normal, but also to activate Sherazin, the Corpse Flower, a card that we're about to see on the list very, very soon. And here is its cousin, Sherazin Corpse Flower. I actually thought this was going to be far and away the worst legendary in Journey to Un'Goro as far as the class legendary minions were concerned. Turns out I am totally wrong because, in fact, Sherazin Corpse Flower is seeing a lot of play in the sort of plant-based Miracle Rogue, I like to call it Miracle Grow, personally, deck that has been quite successful on the ranked ladder so far. In fact, taking #1 legend in a couple regions. So this card, it turns out, is not hard to activate at all, which was never my concern for it. My concern is that it wouldn't give you enough value on the board quick enough. But it turns out getting a Tomb Pillager every turn is actually quite strong, and that's essentially how Sherazin Corpse Flower actually functions in the new version of Miracle Rogue. Just a big body that can apply pressure to your face, can make really efficient minion trades, and gives Miracle Rogue a common asset on the board that they can always do something with or force their opponent to react to, which is actually quite powerful, it turns out. As we move on to the top 3, at the number 3 spot is a card I'm actually not surprised by at all, but it seems a large portion of the community actually has been surprised by the Priest class legendary minion Lyra the Sunshard. I've actually stood up for this card a lot in my reviews, and I said it's going to be better than people expected because a lot of people were calling this an absolutely trash tier card. I saw a lot more promise in that. Of course, I've gotten a lot of other cards wrong, but this is one card I actually did get right in my reviews. Lyra the Sunshard, it turns out, is just a super high value play and works really well in all of these new priest decks that are popping up that utilize a lot of cheap spells. So she gives you surprising amounts of backup value when you're already utilizing these spells on the board in significant ways with things like Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, Shadow Visions, etc. So Lyra the Sunshard is becoming a pretty big part of the meta, believe it or not. Moving on to the number 2 card, all the goodwill I developed for predicting Lyra the Sunshard is going to be wasted because I got the Caverns Below absolutely terribly wrong. I thought this would be the worst of the class legendary quests. It turns out it might just be the best or one of the top 2 or 3 for sure. The Caverns Below has created the Quest Rogue deck, which has been dominant on the meta as far as popularity is concerned. I don't really think it's the strongest deck out there, but it certainly has been played a lot and can be pretty frustrating to lose to. This deck has obviously been played successfully at high legend level already. I think it's going to dial back as we move through Un'Goro, but clearly there's still some potential here and some strength in this card. When I didn't think there was any, I thought it'd be impossible to actually satisfy the quest quickly and easily without compromising your entire deck. It turns out that is not the case. It's actually pretty easy to satisfy the effect. And of course, everybody knew that Crystal Core was going to be really, really strong. But even then, I don't think people realized just how good it would be with various charge minions like Stone Tusk Boar and Southsea Deckhand, where it can do all kinds of crazy burst from hand. So there were a few different ways this card surprised a vast majority of us, and which is cool. I'm glad that Blizzard is smart enough in the design regard that they can create things that surprise us and take us back. Although I don't know it's been a great influence on the game, it definitely has been a surprise. And then finally, my number 1 choice for the most surprising card on this list, as the background artwork might have suggested to you a while ago. This is the Marsh Queen, the Hunter legendary quest. The reason this takes the number 1 spot for me is because so many people were saying this card had the chance to destroy Hearthstone. There was a lot of drama in particular with the professional player life coach and how he was going to quit Hearthstone essentially because of cards like this and Blizzard's blindness to how good this card could be. So this card was probably the most talked about, most discussed, most feared card coming into Journey to Un'Goro. And it turns out, so far, it appears to be absolute trash. It's basically unplayable. It's far and away not the best version of Hunter, and I've only played against this once in probably 100+ Journey to Unguro games so far. So the Marsh Queen, surprisingly quite awful, and the card I think we all got wrong more than anything else. And there you have it. That's my list of the top 10 most surprising cards from Journey to Unguro. What cards out there have surprised you guys? What's way better than you expected? What's way worse? What cards did you actually get it right? Did you predict Marsh Queen was going to be terrible and Caverns Below was going to be fantastic? Share that in the comments below. I'll be happy to hear everything that you guys have to say. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.